It was supposed to be an ordinary night, until two arrogant officers crossed the line and found themselves standing against a living legend. What happened next shook not just a restaurant, but an entire city. Betrayal, prejudice, resilience, and justice collide in a story you will never forget. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because you won't want to miss a single chapter of this incredible journey. The cozy, elegant atmosphere of the Gilded Spoon restaurant on a busy Friday night suddenly became unusually tense. The melodious classical music seemed out of tune, the chatter of the elegant diners gradually faded, and then stopped, replaced by uncomfortable whispers and eyes focused on a corner of the room, where an unbelievable and disgusting scene was taking place. Two Riverdon City Police Department officers, Nathan Ross and Corey Bennett, were standing next to the table where Sergeant Major Frank Theo Carter was sitting. Ross, a white man in his mid-40s with short gray hair, a ruddy face, and a beer belly that peeked out from under his uniform, was leaning down close to the face of the old black man in the wheelchair. His voice was patronizing, condescending, and filled with undisguised contempt. "Hey old man, let me ask you again, who gave you permission to come into this fancy place?" Ross said, his voice deliberately exaggerated. "This is a place for people to enjoy dinner, not a place for beggars like you, understand?" His colleague, Corey Bennett, younger, in his early 30s, tall and thin, stood beside him giggling, hands on hips, looking down at the old man with an equally mocking expression. Sergeant Major Frank Carter, a black man in his 70s, sat upright in a standard wheelchair, a basic wheelchair with nothing special about it. Despite his advanced age and failing legs, he still had the sturdy, resolute features of a professional soldier. He wore an old dark blue suit and a slightly faded but neatly pressed white shirt. The outfit, though not expensive, still exuded form, Ross tie, and cleanliness. He had come here alone, perhaps to celebrate some special occasion. Faced with the officer's blatant insult, the old man raised his head. His eyes, though dulled by age and tiredness, looked straight into Ross's with a strange calm. There was no fear, no deference, only a deep sadness and a flicker of disappointment. "I repeat, officer," his voice was low, slightly hoarse, but clear and dignified. "I am a customer of this restaurant like everyone else sitting here. I am not a beggar." "A customer?" Bennett interjected, his tone full of doubt and mockery. "Where did you get the money to pay for dinner in this cutthroat place? Or are you just going to run off and pretend to be pitiful so they'll let you off?" Ross laughed loudly, a coarse laugh that echoed around the room, drawing more disapproving glances from the surrounding tables. "Or maybe you're rolling this rickety wheelchair in here, waiting for passers-by to take pity on you and throw you a few coins. This isn't a street corner, old man." The cruel, prejudiced, and discriminatory remarks directed at the old man's age, race, disability, and presumed economic status made everyone who heard them angry. Sergeant Major Carter clenched his old, calloused hands on the armrests of his wheelchair, trying to contain the anger boiling in his chest. He had been through so much, faced so many dangers, but this blatant and unjustified insult still hurt him deeply. "Your words," he said, his voice growing sharper, "are an unacceptable insult. I demand that you respect me as a person, as a citizen, and as a customer of this restaurant. I demand that you leave immediately." The calm but determined resistance of the old man in the wheelchair seemed to be an unbearable challenge to Ross. He was not used to someone he considered weak and inferior daring to speak out against him, let alone demanding him to leave. His pride and arrogant nature were strongly aroused. "You dare make demands on me?" Ross roared, his face red. "What right does an old cripple have to make demands here?" He took a step forward, his rough hand extended, intending to shove Sergeant Major Carter's shoulder or pry his hand off the armrest of his wheelchair. "Get out of here. Don't you dirty my eyes." The violence was about to happen right in front of everyone. The atmosphere in the restaurant became thick, tense to the point of suffocation. Would anyone dare to intervene? What more torture would the poor old man have to endure? And why could the two policemen act so cruelly and lawlessly? Sergeant Major Frank Theo Carter was no ordinary old man. Beneath his aging, somewhat dour appearance and current disability lay an illustrious past, a living legend of the United States Marine Corps. He had joined the military at a young age, fought in both the Korean and Vietnam Wars, and then served in numerous other campaigns around the world. He was renowned for his unparalleled courage, superb combat skills, and natural leadership, earning him the respectful nickname Iron Mike from his fellow Marines. The pinnacle of his military career was the fierce battle at Hill 881 South during the Vietnam War, when his unit was surrounded by enemy forces that vastly outnumbered them. Running out of ammunition and suffering heavy casualties, young Sergeant Frank Carter single-handedly fought his way through the battle. He destroyed several enemy fire nests, saved the lives of many wounded comrades, and finally, despite being seriously wounded in the leg, steadfastly commanded his unit to hold its position until reinforcements arrived. That extraordinary act of heroism earned him the United States Army's highest military honor, the Medal of Honor, an award bestowed on only the bravest soldiers. However, the war wound was so severe that he lost part of his left leg and suffered many others sequely, forcing him to be discharged early with the rank of Sergeant Major, the highest rank for a non-commissioned officer in the Marine Corps. Returning to civilian life, he chose a quiet, modest life in his hometown of Riverton. He married his childhood sweetheart, Martha, and they had a simple but happy life together. He rarely talked about his past in combat or boasted about his Medal of Honor, keeping it as a sacred keepsake. He lived on his in-Ross D pension and military pension, not rich, but enough to get by. His greatest pain was the passing of Martha a few years ago due to a serious illness. That evening, Sergeant Major Carter decided to go to the Gilded Spoon by himself. It was his and Martha's 50th wedding anniversary. This was the place where they had celebrated their silver anniversary, and he wanted to return, sit at their usual table by the window, order his wife's favorite dishes, and reminisce about the good times. He dressed as neatly as possible in his old suit, which he had carefully preserved, tied a black bow tie that Martha had given him, and pinned a miniature version of his Medal of Honor ribbon to his lapel, a quiet way to show his appreciation for both his late wife and his illustrious past. On this special day, he just wanted a quiet, private dinner to remember. But that peace was shattered by the unwelcome arrival of officers Nathan Ross and Corey Bennett. The two officers had been dispatched to the area to respond to a report of a car parked illegally, blocking the entrance of a nearby business, a non-emergency, minor incident. After writing the car's owner a sloppy ticket, Ross, naturally curious and fond of exercising his power, invited Bennett inside the Gilded Spoon to look around, even though there was no request from the restaurant or any legitimate reason to do so. As soon as they entered the luxurious, cozy space of the restaurant, Ross's eyes immediately locked onto the dining table where Sergeant Major Carter sat alone. The old man's old wheelchair, unfashionable suit, and dark skin formed a sharp contrast to the luxurious surroundings. Immediately, ugly prejudices arose in Ross's mind. "Look at that, Bennett," he muttered. He whispered to his young colleague, his voice full of contempt and annoyance. Where did another black beggar come from? He must be pretending to be crippled to beg money from some rich person. What kind of business lets people like this ruin their reputation? Bennett, always eager to please, also looked at the old man with disdain. "What an eyesore, boss. Dirty and ragged. Let's clear him out." Without thinking, without asking the manager or understanding the situation, the two officers marched straight to Sergeant Major Carter's table and began their harassment. They threw rude, probing questions. "Hey, old man, what are you doing here? Who let you into this fancy restaurant?" Ross asked in a patronizing tone. "Do you even have money to pay for this meal? Or are you planning to run away without paying?" Bennett added, trying to sound tough. Though surprised and annoyed, Sergeant Major Carter stayed calm and polite. "Hello, officers. I am a customer of this restaurant. I am here for dinner," he said. "A customer?" Ross laughed harshly. "Look in the mirror. You must pick that suit out of a trash bin." He pointed at Carter's old clothes. Bennett sneered. "Probably stole that wheelchair too," pretending to be poor for sympathy. The incident drew attention. Mr. Lambert, the restaurant manager, a polite but shy Frenchman, quickly approached. "Excuse me, officers. May I help you? He is our customer. He has visited several times before with his wife." "What customer?" Ross dismissed Lambert rudely. "Does this look like a customer to you? Or are you hosting charity cases now? Get out of the way. This is police business." Intimidated by Ross's aggression, Mr. Lambert backed off, helpless and anxious. With no one stopping them, Ross and Bennett escalated their verbal attacks. "A black man like you should stay in the slums," Bennett sneered. "Why come to places like this and disgust everyone?" Ross continued, "Real soldiers fight and die. You probably hid in the rear and now pretend to be a crippled hero to make money, right? That last insult. A cruel denial of all the blood Sergeant Major Carter had shed crossed the line. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly his knuckles turned white. A righteous fury flared in his eyes. Enough. His voice was sharp and resonant. Your words insult not just me but every soldier who served and sacrificed for this country. You have no right to treat any citizen with such despicable contempt. His gaze burned into theirs. I demand you stop immediately and leave this restaurant. The old man's sudden, fierce resistance stunned Ross and Bennett. They couldn't believe someone they considered weak dared to defy them. Their shock turned quickly to rage. Their authority felt challenged, their pride wounded. You dare lecture us? Ross roared, his face red with fury. What right does an old cripple have to make demands? Losing all reason, he stepped forward, raising his rough hand, intent on shoving or knocking Sergeant Major Carter from his wheelchair. Get out of here. Don't dirty my eyes again. Violence was about to erupt. The atmosphere froze. Everyone held their breath. Just as Ross's hand was about to land, a clear, determined young voice rang out from a nearby table, cutting through the tension. Wait, officer, please stop. Ross froze, reflexively turning toward the voice, his face dark with anger. Annoyed by the interruption, Bennett and Sergeant Major Carter turned to look. A young man about 30, dressed in a smart casual suit, stood up and walked briskly towards them. He had neatly cropped brown hair, a sharp, intelligent gaze, and the demeanor of a businessman or professional. Who are you? Stay out of this. Ross barked, regaining his arrogant tone. But the young man wasn't intimidated. His eyes quickly focused on Sergeant Major Carter, pausing at the small light blue ribbon with white stars pinned to the old man's lapel, the Medal of Honor. The young man's expression shifted from surprise to deep respect. He stepped closer, ignoring the officers, and said softly, Sir, are you Sergeant Major Carter? Frank Iron Mike Carter. Carter, surprised someone recognized him, gave a slight nod. Yes, young man, it's me. Hearing the confirmation, the young man straightened unconsciously, hands by his sides, his voice trembling slightly. Sergeant Major, I served in the Marine Corps, too. I've read about you, especially the battle at Hill 881 South. It's an honor to meet you. He almost saluted but stopped himself, then turned to Ross and Bennett, his voice cold and cutting. And you two officers, he said sharply, have made a grave mistake. This man you insulted, mocked, and tried to assault is Sergeant Major Frank Iron Mike Carter, a Medal of Honor recipient. He pointed at the tiny badge. That little pin you ignored represents more sacrifice and courage than your entire careers. His words hit like sledgehammers. Ross and Bennett glanced at the badge, then at Carter's dignified face. Ross tie crashed down on them. Their faces turned ghostly pale, limbs shaking. Medal of Honor. They had insulted, mocked, and nearly assaulted a national hero, a man even the president must salute. Ross stammered, voice cracking, terror rising in his chest. Bennett stood trembling, drenched in cold sweat, replaying every cruel word he had said. A terrible fear and regret flooded Bennett as he recalled every insult he made. The young veteran's revelation caused a commotion throughout the restaurant. Murmurs turned into admiration for Sergeant Major Carter and angry boos toward the two officers. Oh my God, that's a Medal of Honor recipient. How dare they treat a hero like that? They should be severely punished. The restaurant manager, Mr. Lambert, once helpless, now turned red with anger and shame. He rushed forward, standing protectively before Sergeant Major Carter. His voice shaking with fury, he demanded, Officers, leave my restaurant immediately. I will report you to the chief of police and the authorities. You will pay for this. Facing the truth, the furious crowd, and Mr. Lambert's firm stance, Ross and Bennett mentally collapsed. Their arrogance vanished, leaving only fear. Ross stammered, trembling, Sergeant Major, we didn't know. Please forgive us. Bennett bowed his head, unable to meet Carter's eyes, whispering a shaky apology. Sergeant Major Carter remained silent, his weary, contemptuous gaze saying more than words. He simply shook his head, a gesture carrying both the patience of a soldier and the contempt for lost honor. But the nightmare had just begun. Mr. Lambert, true to his word, called the Riverton City Police Department immediately after forcing Ross and Bennett to leave. He reported the officers' abuse of power, discrimination, and near assault of a disabled Medal of Honor veteran, noting many witnesses and security footage available. His call, along with reports from the young veteran and other outraged diners, triggered a red alert at ROC headquarters. The news quickly escalated to Chief Victoria Hale, a tough leader who prioritized integrity. Hearing that two officers had publicly humiliated a national hero, enraged and humiliated her. She knew the incident was about to explode. The situation had the potential to cause a major public relations crisis and damage community trust, especially among veterans. Chief Hale immediately dispatched Lieutenant Victor to the Gilded Spoon to assess the situation, reassure the victim, and bring officers Ross and Bennett to headquarters for investigation. She also activated Internal Affairs Division IAD for an urgent and impartial probe. Lieutenant Victor met with Manager Lambert, the young veteran, and several witnesses, then respectfully spoke with Sergeant Major Carter, offering apologies and promising a full investigation. He ordered Ross and Bennett into a patrol car and informed them of their immediate suspension per the chief's orders. The IAD investigation began immediately. Sergeant Major Carter gave a detailed, objective statement. Witnesses, including Lambert and other diners, consistently described the officer's misconduct and demanded accountability. Security footage from the restaurant captured the confrontation and Ross's attempted assault. Body cam data, though incomplete, showed clear misconduct. Personnel files revealed Ross's troubling history of racial bias complaints and Bennett's pattern of complicity. Confronted with overwhelming evidence, both Ross and Bennett admitted to their misconduct, trying weakly to excuse it as misunderstanding or pressure. The IAD's final report concluded that both officers had seriously and flagrantly violated professional codes, procedures, anti-discrimination policies, and laws related to harassment and assault. Their actions not only harmed a national hero, but also deeply damaged the department's public trust. The damage to the Riverton City Police Department's reputation and trust was severe. The IAD recommended permanent dismissal for Nathan Ross and Corey Bennett, and Chief Victoria Hale immediately approved it. The department issued a formal apology to Sergeant Major Frank Carter and a public statement reaffirming its commitment to fairness and respect. However, the consequences for Ross and Bennett didn't end there. The Gilded Spoon incident became a national media storm. Reports highlighted Sergeant Major Carter's bravery and the injustice he endured, sparking outrage and demands for broader police reforms. Veterans groups, civil rights organizations, and politicians voiced strong condemnation. Ross and Bennett, now jobless, faced social ostracism, unable to find work, criticized even by neighbors and former friends. Meanwhile, Chief Hale pushed for deep reforms, enhanced training on bias, cultural sensitivity, a more transparent complaint system, and open dialogues with veteran and civil rights groups. Sergeant Major Carter, humble as always, declined most interviews, wishing only for accountability and justice, not fame. Though unintended, he became a symbol of dignity, resilience, and the fight against prejudice. His story reminds us that true honor lies not in titles but in the courage and conscience of each individual. Through this story, we are reminded that injustice often hides behind a polished surface. It teaches us that silence in the face of wrongdoing is itself a form of complicity. What happened here is not just about two officers abusing their power, it is about the urgent need for every institution, every individual, to confront prejudice wherever it exists. We are also reminded that dignity is not granted by others, it is carried quietly by those who have lived honorably, even when the world forgets to recognize it. What can we do today and 5 years from now? We can listen better, speak louder against injustice, educate those who come after us. And maybe, just maybe, by 2040, we will live in a world where respect is not a privilege, but a given. Note: this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of raising awareness. It highlights issues of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised.